Veteran bought a haunted cabin for $500. What his dog found under the floor changed everything. People said the cabin was haunted long before Cole Harrison bought it for $500, but no one ever explained why his retired K9 Ranger froze the moment they stepped inside, or why the dog refused to sleep until he uncovered what was buried beneath the floorboards. Later, when the federal agents asked how Cole knew the truth had been hidden there for 12 years, he didn't talk about the danger, or the gunfire, or the man who tried to wipe the place clean. He just said one thing. Ranger never warned him of ghosts. Ranger warned him of the living. The road into northern Wyoming looked deserted long before Cole Harrison reached the tree line. Snow clung to the pines like frost-bitten fur, and the wind pushed against his truck with the steady pressure of a hand that wanted him to turn back. He didn't. He had already made too many retreats in his life. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, posture perfect, amber eyes scanning the forest even as the truck crawled forward. The dog didn't fidget, didn't shake, didn't whine. Ranger was a retired K9, bred for discipline, but tonight even he kept looking towards the dark timber as if the entire mountain held its breath. Cole tightened his grip on the wheel. He could feel that familiar pulse in his throat, the one that rose before a mission went sideways. It had been years since Afghanistan, yet some instincts never left. The same was true for Ranger, especially Ranger. The cabin appeared like a bruise against the snow. Weather-beaten, smaller than in the photos, leaning slightly as if trying to escape the cold. $500 had felt like a bargain. Now, staring at it in the half-light, Cole wondered if the price was less a deal and more a warning. He stepped out, boots sinking into the frozen crust. The cold cut through him in a way that felt almost personal. Ranger hopped down beside him and immediately lowered his nose to the ground, tracing invisible paths. "Easy," Cole murmured. "New home, that's all." But Ranger's ears didn't move, didn't relax. They stayed locked forward like he was listening to something under the snow. Inside, the cabin was colder than outside. Air thin, stale, untouched for years. Cole lit the small fire, watching the flames struggle in the damp chimney. Ranger circled once, twice, then lay near the door, eyes open and fixed. Cole dropped into the old armchair with a long, breathless exhale. Silence filled the room with the weight of expectation. It was the silence he'd come for, the kind that might quiet the explosions still lodged in the back of his mind. But this silence wasn't empty. It felt crowded, alive, watching. Ranger lifted his head. The first sound came softly, almost polite. A tap, then another. Faint, rhythmic, like knuckles brushing stone beneath the floor. Cole sat up straighter. The fire cracked. Ranger growled low and deep, not warning, not fear, but recognition. Cole had heard that sound from him before, the night an IED was buried 5 inches from their boots. Ranger had frozen just like this, head tilted, muscles locked, eyes narrowing at something only he could sense. Ranger stood and moved towards the fireplace. His nails clicked against the old pine floor. Cole followed, pulse climbing. "Buddy, it's probably just the wind." Ranger didn't look back. He lowered his head, pressed his nose to the stone hearth, and inhaled sharply. Then he barked, one loud, sharp explosion of sound that felt too big for the tiny room. Cole jerked back. The dog barked again, louder, then jabbed a paw hard into the base of the hearth. His claws scraped across the mortar. "Ranger, stop." But Ranger wasn't stopping. He was focused, trembling with urgency, the same posture he took when someone's life depended on his next move. Cole grabbed the flashlight and crouched. The beam caught on rough stone, then something else. A thin line along one slab. Straighter, slightly darker. He ran his glove across it. The mortar was newer, smoother, wrong. A cold tightness wrapped around his ribs. Someone sealed this. Not decades ago, recently. Ranger barked again, but it wasn't the barking that froze Cole. It was the next sound. From deep beneath the hearth, something shifted. A hollow thump, muted by layers of earth and stone. Cole jerked the light toward the fireplace. The noise came again, a slow drag, as if something down there had waited a long time to move. He forced himself to breathe. Old houses settle. Animals get stuck. Sounds have explanations. Ranger's fur stood on end. Another tap came from the floor, this time directly beneath Cole's boots. He stepped back quickly. Ranger positioned himself between Cole and the fireplace, body rigid. The dog wasn't afraid. He was guarding. Cole checked the windows. Snow blurred the glass, but movement flickered beyond the tree line. A shadow, tall enough to be human, standing still against the storm. He blinked. The shape vanished. His throat tightened. The tapping stopped. The cabin sank into silence so dense it felt suffocating. Ranger growled again, the kind of growl that meant danger was not coming. It was already here. Cole reached for his crowbar. His hand shook in a way that had nothing to do with cold. He wedged the bar under the strange slab of stone and pushed hard. At first, nothing happened. Then a crack split the air like a bone snapping. The slab shifted. The smell that rose from the opening wasn't rot. It wasn't earth. It was metallic. Sharp, like rust mixed with something older. Something that didn't belong under a house. Cole lifted the slab fully. The cavity beneath was narrow, black, and deep enough for a person to crawl inside. He shone the flashlight down. The beam struck something pale. Fabric, torn, brown with age, then the curve of a sleeve, and a hand. Rigid, dry, human. Ranger snarled, stepping forward. The tapping started again, directly below them. Cole stumbled back as the floor vibrated once, softly, like a heartbeat under the wood. Then, as if echoing from the mountain itself, a voice rose from outside the cabin. Not a voice he could understand, just a low, drawn-out call carried on the wind. Ranger turned, staring at the door. Cole swallowed hard. The veteran had come here looking for quiet. But quiet wasn't what he'd bought for $500. He had bought a secret, and Ranger had just dug up the first piece of it. Morning came quiet, but not gentle. The kind of cold Wyoming dawn that seeped into bone the moment Cole stepped outside. He hadn't slept. The image of the pale hand under the hearth clung to him like frost. Ranger hadn't slept either. The dog sat alert on the porch, his gaze sweeping the tree line in slow, deliberate arcs. Not anxious, protective. Cole loaded him into the truck. They needed supplies. They needed answers more. The road into town carved its way through pines bowed under fresh snow. Cold Creek was small, barely a handful of old storefronts along a single two-lane stretch. A gas station, a hardware store, a diner with a flickering neon sign. That was it. When Cole pulled up, the locals stopped talking mid-sentence. Conversations thinned into silence. People watched him through windows or from the hoods of their trucks, eyes narrowed with the familiarity of small-town suspicion. Ranger stepped out first. Even that seemed to ripple through the street. A few folks backed up instinctively, though the dog was calm, controlled, every movement precise. Cole pretended not to notice. Inside the diner, warmth hit him first, then the smell of bacon and yesterday's coffee. A woman in her 40s with auburn hair tied back in a loose clip looked up from behind the counter. She didn't flinch at the sight of him the way the others had. Her eyes moved past him to Ranger, who had taken up a silent guard by the door. "You're not from here," she said simply. "No, ma'am," Cole replied, sliding onto a stool. She poured him coffee without asking. "Name's Lucy Hayes. I run this place. Folks around here tend to keep to themselves. Don't take it personal." Cole nodded. "That seems to be the vibe." Lucy studied him a long moment, then said, "You bought the Ridgeway cabin." Yeah. She let out a slow breath. That place hasn't had a full-time occupant in 15 years. Cole took a sip of coffee. Any particular reason? Her voice softened. Depends on who you ask. Some say it's cursed. Some say it's haunted. Most just say you should have picked literally anywhere else. Cole forced a faint smile. Haunted's fine. I've been through worse. Lucy's gaze moved to the faint scar on his jaw, the rigid posture he still carried even while sitting. Military. EOD. Cole answered quietly. Long time ago. Lucy's eyes flicked to Ranger. And him? He's the only one who made it back. Something shifted in her expression. Respect. Sadness. Understanding. Before she could ask more, the bell on the door chimed. 2 men walked in, heavy boots, thick jackets, eyes locked onto Cole immediately. Not aggressive, just assessing, whispering something he couldn't hear. Lucy leaned closer. Ignore them. They're scared of shadows in this town. What kind of shadows? Cole asked. The kind that used to write stories, she said, then disappeared. Cole looked up slowly. Stories. A journalist rented your cabin before it went up for sale, named Alan Crowley, investigative reporter from Denver. He came here digging into something about the mountain, about the water. Lucy hesitated. Then he just vanished. Middle of winter. Search parties, dogs, volunteers, nothing. Cole felt Ranger press closer to his leg. The dog's ears angled subtly backward, a silent warning. Lucy lowered her voice. After Crowley disappeared, strange things started happening up there. Folks heard noises from the ground. Lights in the woods. People stopped going near the ridge. Then the cabin changed owners every few months until it finally sat empty. Cole stared into his coffee. The tapping under the floor. The sealed hearth. The shadow outside the window. Lucy looked at him intently. Whatever brought you here, soldier? That cabin isn't just old. It's holding something. Cole felt an old heaviness stir in his chest, the same heaviness that always came before a memory he didn't want. He tried to focus on the clink of silverware, the hum of the diner's heater, anything but the past. But it came anyway, without warning. Dust, heat, the deafening crack of an explosion that tore the world open. Sand raining from the sky. Screams! And Ranger, younger then, darker coated, pinning Cole to the ground as fire rolled over them. His team, 6 men bonded by endless nights, blown apart in a heartbeat. Only 2 living beings crawled out of that street. Cole and Ranger, both scorched by sound more than flame. The diner faded back in slowly. Lucy was watching him. You okay? Yeah, he said, clearing his throat. Just thinking. Ranger nudged his knee, a grounding gesture, a reminder Cole wasn't alone. Lucy stepped back, but her voice remained low. I'll give you advice once, only once. Listen to your dog. Animals here sense things we don't. And whatever that cabin took from the last man, it's not done asking questions. Before Cole could respond, Ranger's body snapped into alertness. His head jerked toward the window. His growl was quiet, but absolute. Cole followed his gaze. A black SUV had pulled up across the street. Tinted windows. No plates on the front. The engine running, exhaust fogging the air. Then, as quickly as it arrived, it backed up and disappeared down the road. Lucy's face drained. That's not a local car. Cole stood slowly. Ranger pressed close, eyes locked on the fading tracks in the snow. Lucy whispered, You need to... Be careful. Whoever's watching that cabin isn't from here either. Cole paid for the coffee, thanked her, and stepped outside with Ranger at his heel. Cold Creek had fallen into that eerie stillness again. People stared at him from doorways. The sky felt lower. The wind carried a metallic scent he couldn't shake. Ranger sniffed the snow near the truck, then froze. One paw lifted. Eyes sharp, He wasn't pointing at a threat. He was pointing at a message, a single boot print. Fresh, leading toward the road. Cole's breath clouded in front of him. Ranger looked up at him, expression steady, almost communicating. You didn't find that cabin by accident. Cole swallowed. The past he tried to outrun had followed him to Wyoming. And the truth under that floor? It wasn't done speaking. The wind had eased by the time Cole and Ranger returned to the cabin, but the quiet that settled over the ridge felt wrong, as if the mountain were holding something in its lungs. Cole dropped the supplies near the door, but Ranger didn't wait. The dog slipped past him with a purpose so sharp it cut through the room like a blade. Ranger went straight to the fireplace, not sniffing lazily, not curious. Hunting. Cole froze mid-step. Ranger had only moved like this a handful of times in his life, and each time had ended the same way, with someone walking away alive who shouldn't have. The dog's body lowered, muscles flexing under his coat, ears pinned with laser focus. "Buddy, talk to me." Cole whispered. Ranger didn't. He pressed his nose to the stones again, inhaling fast. Then he backed up 2 steps and slammed his paw down on one slab in particular, a hard, decisive strike. The sound echoed through the cabin like metal hitting bone. Cole felt the chill crawl up his spine. "All right, show me." Ranger barked once, sharp and clipped. A command, not a request. Cole knelt and ran his fingers across the stones. Most were rough and aged, cold to the touch. But the one Ranger had struck felt smoother, the mortar line almost straight compared to the cracked edges around it. Someone had patched it differently. Recently, maybe. Without thinking, Cole grabbed the crowbar. He wedged it into the seam. The first push did nothing. The second made the stone groan. Ranger growled, the sound low and steady, as if encouraging him to keep going. On the third push, the mortar split. A thin crack blossomed across the slab, followed by a puff of stale, icy air that crawled up from the gap. Cole hissed. "That's not normal." Ranger stepped back but didn't relax. His tail stiffened. His stance matched the one he'd taken in Kandahar when he found a buried device with 6 men walking toward it. Cole's heartbeat doubled. He lifted the slab aside. The hole beneath was narrow, barely big enough for a grown man to slide into. A storage cavity, sealed tight for years. The flashlight beam cut into the darkness and found dust swirling like disturbed ash. Then, the beam hit something metallic. A box. Steel, dented, heavy. Cole reached in and dragged it out. Ranger leaned over the edge of the cavity, sniffing the air coming from inside. His whiskers twitched, his ears flattened. "What is it?" Cole whispered. He lowered the light again. That's when he saw it. Cloth, browned with age, shredded along one side. At first he thought it was a tarp, maybe an old jacket stuffed beneath the floor. Then the shape revealed itself. The curve of a wrist, the jut of knuckles, a human hand, dry, blackened, long dead. Cole's stomach lurched. Not from horror, from recognition. He had seen bodies buried under rubble before, limbs out of place, untouched by time, yet changed by it. Ranger growled, louder this time, his chest vibrating against Cole's arm. Cole swallowed hard and forced his flashlight toward the box he'd pulled out. The lid wasn't locked. He flipped it open carefully. Notebooks. Dozens of them, stacked, their edges yellowed. Photos on thin paper, maps sketched by hand. And on top of everything, a journal with a name scrawled on the cover in faded ink. Nathan Crowley. Cole blinked hard. Lucy had said the name differently, said Alan or Alex, but the last name was unmistakable. Crowley, the reporter who had vanished 12 years ago without a trace, the reporter no one had ever found. Cole flipped open the first page. The handwriting was small, neat but rushed near the bottom. Dates lined the margins. Notes about wells, strange shipments, trucks moving at night. One line caught the light. "If anything happens to me, it starts under the cabin." Cole looked toward the cavity again, bile rising. Ranger's ears pricked. Cole turned. A sound thumped beneath the remaining stones, not a settling creak, not old wood expanding. A knock, one then another. Ranger barked and lunged forward, teeth bared. Cole dragged him back by instinct, breath coming fast. The floor vibrated for a second, a pulse, then stopped. The silence snapped back into place. Cole stared at Ranger. The dog's fur was bristled along his spine, his breathing sharp, each inhale quick and shallow. His stance didn't change from the one he used on active duty when he sensed a live device inches from ignition. Beyond danger, beyond instinct. Ranger wasn't afraid. He was warning. Cole grabbed a notebook and flipped further. The entries became frantic. Crowley had written about toxic runoff in the mountain, strange barrels buried under the soil, men with heavy boots watching his cabin at night. Then the last full entry, written shakily. They said they'd seal me with the truth. A chill broke across Cole's skin. He looked at the hand again. Someone had. Before he could think further, Ranger moved. Fast. He shoved past Cole and placed himself between the cavity and the door, eyes fixed, body trembling, tracking something unseen. A shadow passed across the frosted window. Cole's breath hitched. Someone was outside. Someone close enough to hear the stone break, close enough to hear the knock, close enough to finish what they had started 12 years earlier. Then, suddenly, another twist. Ranger didn't look at the window. He looked at the back wall. A faint scrape came from under the floorboards. Not tapping this time. A drag. Slow, like something trying to move but trapped in a tight space. Cole grabbed the crowbar again, holding it like a weapon. "Buddy, stay behind me." Ranger didn't. He moved ahead, body low, shoulders tight with purpose, not fear. He approached danger the same way he approached every bomb he ever disarmed. Head on. Cole's throat tightened. Whatever lived under this cabin, whatever Crowley had died for, Ranger sensed it first. And Ranger was never wrong. The storm pressed against the cabin walls like a living thing. Wind scraped along the roof, rattling the shutters in sharp bursts. Inside, the fire had burned low, leaving more shadow than light. Cole sat at the table with Crowley's notebooks spread in front of him, their pages brittle beneath his fingertips. Ranger lay nearby, but not resting. His eyes tracked every sound the mountain made. Cole flipped to a page marked with a torn corner. Crowley's handwriting slanted downward, as if he had been writing fast, trying to get the words out before someone reached the door. Summit Ridge mining is poisoning the valley. Arsenic, mercury, barrels buried along the streams. The creek behind Ridgeway cabin is contaminated. Locals warned to stay silent. Cole's pulse thudded. He had seen mining disasters before. Corruption buried under rock and legal paperwork. But the next entry sank something deeper into his chest. Saw headlights again tonight. Not locals. Someone watching the cabin. Under it, a final note, jagged and incomplete. If I disappear, follow the water. Cole sat back, exhaling sharply. The cabin creaked behind him. Ranger lifted his head. "You hear it too, don't you, buddy?" Ranger didn't blink. He stood and walked to the door, posture rigid, tail low and straight. His nose pressed against the crack under the frame. He inhaled once, sharply, then growled. Cole moved to the window and wiped away the fog with his sleeve. The world outside was white, endless and shifting. Snow fell so thick it looked like the sky was collapsing. But at the edge of the tree line, faint and blurred, something broke the perfect surface of the snow. Tracks. Fresh. Cole grabbed his coat and stepped onto the porch. Ranger was already ahead of him, bounding through the drift with precise, silent motion. The air stabbed at Cole's lungs, but he followed the dog around the side of the cabin. The prints were unmistakable. Human. heavy tread, leading from the woods straight toward the cabin. Not away. Ranger pressed his nose into one print, inhaled deeply, then snapped his head toward the forest. His bark shattered the quiet. Someone was out there. Cole turned, slowly, scanning the trees. The wind carried no voices, no crunching snow, nothing. Whoever had come here was gone, or hiding, watching from a distance he couldn't see. Ranger circled once, then stopped abruptly. His paw hovered over a print half filled with snow. Cole crouched and brushed it clean. A boot print. But something was off. The heel had a pattern he recognized. Tactical. Expensive. Not the kind sold in Cold Creek's only hardware store. The kind worn by people who don't want to be identified. Cole rose fast, adrenaline spiking, memories slamming into him. Ambushes in narrow alleys, tracks in dirt that led to hidden triggers. Ranger barking seconds before the world tore open. The dog nudged him sharply, grounding him again. Cole placed a hand on Ranger's shoulder. Good work. The two circled back to the cabin. Before they reached the porch, headlights flashed in the swirling snow. A truck crawled up the narrow road, wipers slapping frost aside. Cole instinctively stepped in front of Ranger. The truck stopped. A door opened. Sheriff Dalton climbed out. He was bigger up close, a mountain of a man with a grey beard and a badge dulled by the cold. Dalton took a long look at Cole, then at Ranger, who remained silent but alert at Cole's side. "Heard you were in town today," Dalton said. "Thought I'd stop by. Folks talk around here." Cole folded his arms. "About what?" Dalton's eyes drifted to the cabin. "You bought this place." "People wonder why. It doesn't have a good history." Cole didn't respond. Dalton stepped closer. Snow crackled under his boots. "Listen, I don't know what brought you to Cold Creek, but that cabin's not something to mess with. Last man who spent serious time here was Crowley. You know what happened to him." Cole kept his face still. He didn't trust his voice. Dalton exhaled, breath fogging the air. "You seem like a decent man. A soldier? I'm telling you straight, don't go turning stones that were meant to stay down. This town has made peace with the past. I suggest you do the same." Ranger growled. Quiet but deep enough to vibrate through Cole's chest. Dalton's gaze dropped to the dog. "That animal knows trouble when he sees it." Cole answered softly. "He always has." Dalton's expression changed for a flicker of a second. Something like worry or guilt, then it vanished under the sheriff's practiced calm. "Do yourself a favor," Dalton said. "Fix up the place. Stay warm. But don't go chasing ghosts. Ghosts around here bite back." He walked back to his truck. But before climbing in, he paused, looked at the forest, then at Cole. "And if someone's been on your property tonight, keep it quiet. Last thing this town needs is another mess." He drove off, tires swallowing the snow. Cole stood in the dark, Ranger pressed against his leg. "Keep it quiet," Cole murmured. "That's what Crowley did. Look where it got him." Ranger's ears twitched. He stepped toward the cabin door, head low, gaze locked on something inside. Not outside. Cole followed. When he opened the door, the fire had nearly died. In the dim light, the broken slab near the hearth was exactly as he'd left it. But the notebook on the table wasn't. It was open. To a page he hadn't flipped to, a map of the ridge. And beneath it, in rushed handwriting, "They are still watching." Cole felt the floor shift under him as Ranger lowered his head and growled at the darkened corner of the cabin, as if something invisible was moving there. Ranger wasn't reacting to the past. He was reacting to the present. Someone had been inside. The knock on the cabin door came just after noon, sharp and confident, not hesitant like a local's. Ranger was on his feet before the second knock landed. His bark tore through the room, raw and warning. Cole rested a hand on the dog's flank, feeling the tension vibrating through him. Outside stood a man in a tailored winter coat, dark gloves, and boots far too clean for anyone who lived in Cold Creek. His smile was thin, professional, the kind used in boardrooms, not mountains. "Mr. Harrison, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Cole didn't open the door fully. "Can I help you?" The man offered a gloved hand. "Owen Hale, CEO of Summit Ridge Mining." Ranger's growl deepened, rising from his chest like distant thunder. Hale blinked at the dog, amused. "Impressive animal?" "Military?" he asked. Cole didn't answer. Hale continued. "I heard you bought the Ridgeway cabin. Word travels quickly in small towns. Congratulations. Beautiful property. Untouched land. Rare to find in this state." Cole narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" Hale smiled again, too easily. "To make you an offer. A good one. My company has interest in expanding water testing sites along the ridge. Scientific work. That cabin sits on a key access point. I'm prepared to compensate you very fairly for signing over the property rights." Cole leaned on the door. "I bought this place to live in it, not flip it." Hale's smile didn't falter, but something changed in his eyes. A flicker, calculation. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. "This isn't a flip. This is an opportunity. My offer is $180,000. Cash. Today." Cole stared. That was nearly 400 times what he had paid. Ranger stepped forward, teeth bare, barking once so hard the sound shook dust from the rafters. Hale flinched, stepping back quickly. "You should keep that dog under control, Mr. Harrison." "He isn't the one who needs controlling," Cole replied. Hale wiped the snow from his sleeve, mask slipping for the first time. His voice chilled. "Think carefully. That property has caused enough trouble in this town. Best thing you can do is take the money and move on." Cole didn't blink. "Not for sale." Hale studied him, long and hard, a quiet standoff shaping itself in the doorway. Then he forced a smile back into place. "All right, but my number won't stay on the table long." He turned to leave, boots crunching the snow with precise rhythm. Ranger didn't stop watching him until he disappeared down the road. Cole shut the door slowly. Ranger sat in front of him, looking up as if asking a question. "Yeah, buddy," Cole murmured. "I felt it too." He crossed to the table where Crowley's notebook still lay open. Something had been bothering him since the night before, a thought he kept pushing aside. He grabbed the metal box again and dug deeper this time. Beneath the notebooks were glass vials sealed with wax, each filled with murky water, labels written in Crowley's rushed handwriting. Creek Sample 1, Creek Sample 2, Ridge Runoff Tailings Leak. The colors were wrong, grayish, swirling, metallic residue clinging to the glass. Ranger sniffed the bottles and pulled back sharply, sneezing hard. Cole uncorked one, held it to the light. The smell was faint but familiar. Industrial. Toxic. He had smelled water like this in Kandahar, where runoff from illegal dumps had poisoned entire blocks of families. He grabbed the next item in the box. Printed memos. Company letterheads. Summit Ridge Mining. Some were dated 12 years ago. Cole unfolded one with shaking fingers. Internal test results. Elevated arsenic, mercury, cadmium. Directive: destroy all unofficial samples. Secondary directive: halt contact with all press inquiries. The final page was a hand-scrawled note paper-clipped to the memos. If I disappear, they are responsible. Tell someone. Anyone. Do not trust the sheriff. Nathan Crowley. A surge of cold went through Cole far sharper than the winter wind. Ranger whined, pacing. His nails tapped the wood in quick, agitated rhythms. Not fear. Frustration. The dog understood the tone in Cole's voice, the shift in the air, the rise of danger. Cole sat heavily, the cabin spinning around him for a moment. Everything clicked into place like a trap snapping shut. Crowley found proof. Summit Ridge Mining was poisoning the valley and burying the evidence. The sheriff had turned a blind eye. Crowley had been silenced, and now the company wanted his land because the water source ran directly beneath it. They had sealed Crowley's remains under the cabin floor, and Hale had just offered a small fortune to get that land back before Cole found the rest. Ranger stopped pacing and stared at the broken stone slab, ears forward, body rigid. Cole followed his gaze. The dragging sound from beneath the floor returned, faint but undeniable. Someone. Something. Still down there. Cole grabbed his flashlight and moved toward the hearth with Ranger at his side. Just as he knelt, a crack split the quiet. Not from inside the cabin, from outside. A thin line of smoke curled through the window frame. Cole lunged toward the glass. A vehicle had stopped at the edge of the property. A dark figure stepped out, watching, waiting. Ranger bared his teeth. Cole whispered, "Stay with me." Because now he knew the truth. He had stepped into a story someone had killed to bury, and they were ready to kill again. The storm came in fast, swallowing the ridge in a wall of white. By midnight, the wind was howling hard enough to shake the window frames, and the cabin groaned with every gust. Cole tossed another log into the stove, rubbing the back of his neck. Ranger hadn't rested once. The dog paced the floor in tight loops, nose twitching, ears cutting toward the door every few seconds. Something had shifted in the air. Cole felt it too. Not fear, not noise, pressure, the kind a soldier learns not to ignore. Then Ranger froze. His head snapped toward the front wall. One paw lifted, his body angled low, pointing to the left like a trained arrow. A warning. Seconds later, the first gunshot tore through the window. Glass exploded across the room. Cole hit the floor instinctively. Ranger barked once, short and sharp, the distinct canine signal Cole hadn't heard since Kandahar. That window. 2 shooters. Moving now. Cole rolled behind the overturned table and grabbed his rifle. Another shot punched into the wall inches above his shoulder. Snow burst into the cabin through the shattered glass. Ranger sprinted to the back door, barking twice. Flank. Movement behind. They were surrounded. Cole's breath steamed as he pushed across the floor. 4 distinct muzzle flashes outside. 2 on each side. Professional spacing. Not local hunters or drunks. Hale had sent them. Ranger growled, low and vibrating with a fury Cole had only seen before bombs. The next shot hit the stove, sending sparks across the floor. Fire licked up the wall instantly. Wood popped and hissed as flames climbed the dry beams. The cabin was turning into a furnace. Cole grabbed the metal box of evidence, slung his pack, and crawled toward Ranger. The dog was already pressed against the back wall, pawing at the floor vent, a tiny grate Crowley had once jammed shut with a nail. Cole ripped the grate open. Cold earth smell rushed out. A crawl tunnel. Crowley had dug it. Gunfire ripped through the room again. Part of the roof caved, snow and burning timber crashing down. Heat blasted across Cole's face. "Go," he said. Ranger dove into the tunnel head first, paws scraping dirt. Cole shoved his rifle through, then hauled himself in as the fire roared above them. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for a man to crawl. Ranger moved with purpose, stopping only to check the air ahead. Smoke filtered down through cracks in the floorboards, mixing with the icy soil. Behind them, the cabin collapsed with a roar. Snow filled the tunnel entrance, sealing it off. The only light came from ahead, faint and flickering like a dying candle. Ranger growled sharply. Not at the collapse, at something waiting outside. Cole pushed forward, heart punching his ribs. The exit hatch was just ahead. Ranger nudged it with his nose, then looked, back at Cole. Ready. Cole lifted the hatch slowly, letting a blade of freezing air cut through the darkness. The forest appeared through a veil of blowing snow. Moonlight glowed faint on trunks and branches. A figure knelt 10 yards away, adjusting his rifle. Cole surged upward. Ranger launched first. The shepherd hit the gunman with the full force of a missile, teeth clamping around the man's forearm. The attacker screamed and swung wildly. Ranger held on, biting deeper, dragging him down into the snow. Another shooter sprinted toward them from the right. Cole fired twice. The man folded to the ground, rifle skidding across the ice. A third shooter fired from behind a spruce. Cole dropped low, rolling behind a fallen log. Bark exploded around him. He shot back, clean and controlled. One hit. The figure collapsed. Ranger snarled and released the first gunman, leaping back just in time. A bullet grazed his side, slicing across his ribs. The dog yelped but stayed on his feet, stance wide, eyes blazing with fury. Cole's stomach tightened. "Stay with me, buddy." The man Ranger had tackled crawled backward, hands raised. "Please, please, don't shoot!" Cole kept his rifle trained on him, stepping forward. "Start talking." The man shook, breath fogging in frantic bursts. "We were ordered to burn it down, clear everything. No loose ends." "By who?" The man hesitated. Ranger bared his teeth, taking one slow step forward. "Owen Hale!" The attacker choked out. He said the cabin was a liability. He said the reporter, the one who disappeared. He swallowed hard. He said you were next. A gust of wind slammed through the trees, sending needles spinning across the snow. Cole stared down at the man, anger tightening every muscle in his body. Ranger stood beside him, wounded but unbreakable, blood staining the white ground. The dog leaned forward, steady and protective, waiting for Cole's command. The cabin behind them crackled and hissed, flames devouring the last of the old timber. The night glowed orange against the storm. Cole looked at the burning wreckage. Hale had tried to erase the truth. Instead, he had just confirmed it. Cole lowered his weapon slightly, breathing hard. "Tell your boss I'm coming." The man stared at him, terrified. Cole stepped back. Ranger growled just once, enough to send the attacker scrambling into the trees. When the forest swallowed him, Cole knelt beside Ranger. The wound wasn't deep, but blood streaked the dog's fur. "You saved my life again," he whispered. Ranger pressed his head against Cole's shoulder, steady as stone. Storm winds whipped around them, carrying embers from the destroyed cabin into the night sky. Cole stood, tightening his pack, staring toward the dark valley where Summit Ridge mining hid its secrets. Hale had started a war. Now Cole wasn't running. He was hunting. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving the valley carved in white silence. Cole guided Ranger down the slope toward Cold Creek, the dog limping slightly but refusing help. Every few steps, Ranger glanced back toward the ridge where the cabin had burned. His posture was sharp, alert, as if he believed the mountain still watched them. Cole reached Mira Dawson's cabin just after sunrise. The young reporter opened the door with a look that shifted instantly from annoyance to shock when she saw Ranger's wound and the soot coating Cole's clothes. "What happened to you?" Cole didn't waste time. He placed the metal box on her kitchen table. "Evidence. All of it. Crowley's notes, water samples, Summit Ridge documents, internal memos. Everything Hale killed to keep hidden." Mira slipped on gloves and flipped through the files, her breath catching. "These are real. This is federal-level wrongdoing." He nodded. "And Summit Ridge sent a kill team to erase it last night. Cabin's gone. 3 shooters dead, 1 still running." Mira steadied herself against the counter. "And Hale. Coming. He'll want to finish the job himself." She looked at Ranger, then back at Cole. "What do you need from me?" "Your voice," Cole said. "And your reach. You trust the EPA, the Bureau?" "Some." She exhaled slowly. Enough to take a chance. Mira's hands moved fast. She uploaded Crowley's files, every photo, memo, and sample log. She sent them to a contact in the EPA's Water Contamination Division, then another in the FBI's Environmental Crimes Unit. By the time she hit the third send button, her phone buzzed non-stop. Cole, they're responding. They're actually responding. Then her face went pale. They want live confirmation. Now. Cole glanced out the window. The ridge loomed in the distance like a dark spine. No time to hide. No time to run. Ranger stiffened suddenly, ears cutting toward the road. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Mira stepped behind Cole. You hear that? More than hear. Cole felt it. Tires on gravel. Slow. Purposeful. A black SUV rolled into view, engine humming low. Hale stepped out, coat snapping in the cold wind. 2 armed men flanked him, scanning the tree line. Cole stepped onto the porch, rifle slung over his shoulder. Ranger stood at his side, growl deepening with every second. Hale's smile was thin. You cost me 3 good men last night, Harrison. That was sloppy of you. Cole didn't respond. Hale's voice dropped. You hand over the evidence, and maybe I let you keep breathing. Otherwise... He glanced at Ranger. That dog dies first. Ranger stepped forward, lips curling back. A silent threat. Mira whispered, Cole, they already have the files. EPA, FBI, everything's out. Something flickered in Hale's eyes. Fear trying to lift its head. Then a sound split the sky. A rhythmic thunder. Cole looked up. A helicopter cut through the clouds, spinning snow into spirals. Then another. Within seconds, blue lights flashed between the pines. Black-clad agents stormed the clearing, rifles aimed at Hale's SUV. Federal agents, do not move. Hale spun around as the cabin yard erupted in shouts. His men grabbed for their weapons, but the agents were faster. One was tackled to the ground. The other dropped his gun and raised his hands. Hale backed away, panic cracking his composure for the first time. You can't prove anything. This is a misunderstanding. The lead agent stepped forward. Owen Hale, you are under arrest for conspiracy to conceal hazardous contamination, involvement in the disappearance of Nathan Crowley, and orchestrating an armed attack on a United States veteran. Hale froze as 2 agents locked cuffs around his wrists. He shouted something, a desperate snarl swallowed by rotor wash. Ranger didn't move. He stood like a statue beside Cole, watching calmly as justice caught up. Mira exhaled shakily. My God, Cole, we did it. No, he said quietly. Crowley did. We just finished the work he started. One of the federal officers approached Ranger and knelt. I heard about what he did last night. There's a unit for dogs like him. They'll want to honor him formally. Respect K9 Division. Ranger sniffed the agent's glove cautiously, then pressed his head against the man's arm in a gesture as old as trust itself. He deserves it, Cole said softly. The agents led Hale to an armored vehicle. Snowflakes clung to his coat. His face was hollow, furious, defeated. Cole watched him go. Ranger leaned against his leg. A small reassurance, a promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Mira looked out at the clearing where federal officers now moved methodically, collecting evidence under the shadow of the mountains. This valley might actually heal now. She whispered. Cole nodded, rubbing Ranger's neck. Maybe we all will. Above them, the helicopters lifted off, carrying Hale toward the justice he'd spent years avoiding. The sound faded into the vast Wyoming sky, and for the first time since Cole arrived in Cold Creek, the land finally felt like it could breathe again. A year later, the ridge looked almost unrecognizable. Spring sunlight filtered through the tall Wyoming pines, warming the last patches of melting snow. Birds returned to the valley, and the creek, once tainted with heavy metals, ran clear for the first time in over a decade. The EPA teams had come and gone, leaving behind filtration systems, warning signs, and a roadmap for restoration. Federal investigators still visited Cold Creek every few months, tying up loose ends of the Summit Ridge scandal. But for Cole Harrison, The world had finally slowed down, and for Ranger it had finally returned to something like peace. The new cabin stood exactly where the old one had burned, but everything else was different. Cole built it himself, log by log, with help from a few locals. Men who used to cross the street to avoid him now brought lumber, drills, and weekend hours. The scars on the land remained faintly visible, black streaks in the soil, but Cole left some of them untouched. Honesty mattered more than perfection. Ranger lay on the porch in the afternoon sun, chin resting on crossed paws. His coat was thick again, the bullet scar hidden beneath new fur. His eyes tracked every movement between the trees, but without the tension of those early months. He watched because it was in his nature, not because he expected danger. Cole stepped outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. One he placed on the porch rail. Ranger's mug, always filled with warm broth. An old patrol habit he couldn't shake. The dog lifted his head and nudged Cole's leg before taking slow sips. Cole smiled and sat beside him. A breeze carried the faint scent of pine sap. Peace. Real peace. Cold Creek itself had changed, too. Tourists came through now, curious about the town that cracked open a mining conspiracy. The diner was always busy. Lucy Hayes claimed she'd never sold more pie in her life. Mira Dawson had become something of a local celebrity, though she still insisted Ranger was the real hero. Some days, Cole agreed. Cole walked with Ranger down the trail toward the clearing at the forest edge. A simple stone stood there, cut smooth on one side. No ceremony had marked the day it was placed. No speeches, just Cole, Mira, and the sheriff's replacement. The only words carved into the granite were, "Nathan Crowley. He told the truth when no one else would." Ranger approached the stone first, as he always did, sniffing it, circling once before lying down beside it. Cole rested a hand on Ranger's back. "I wish you could have seen justice." Cole murmured, "But we carried it the rest of the way for you." Ranger shifted closer, the weight of him grounding in a way that felt familiar and old. Cole took a breath, steady and slow. For years he had lived with noise, internal, relentless. But now the silence didn't threaten him. It didn't remind him of explosions or empty nights overseas. Now it felt earned. As they sat beside the memorial, footsteps approached on the trail. Mira, wearing hiking boots and a windbreaker, lifted a hand in greeting. "Thought I'd find you two here," she said gently. "Always end up here," Cole replied. She knelt beside Ranger and scratched behind his ears. The dog leaned into her hand, tail tapping softly against the ground. EPA finally gave the all-clear on the upper creek. Mira said, "Kids can play in it again come summer." Cole smiled. "That's good. That's real good." Mira hesitated. "You know, the network still wants to interview you both. People love this story." Cole shook his head lightly. "Tell them to interview Crowley's sister instead. Or the families who lived downstream. They deserve the spotlight." "What about Ranger? He's basically a celebrity." Ranger huffed and pressed his head against Cole's knee as if giving his answer. Cole chuckled. "He likes it quiet. We both do." Mira rose, brushing dirt from her jeans. "There's a town barbecue. Next week. You coming?" "Maybe," Cole said, "if he's up for it." Ranger gave a short bark, the decisive kind, and Mira grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." She waved goodbye and headed back toward town. Cole remained at the stone a while longer, running his hand over the rough engraving. After a long silence, he stood. "Come on, partner, let's go home." Ranger rose, stretching with a low groan, then trotted beside him up the trail. The cabin came into view, framed against the mountains. Smoke drifted gently from the chimney. The land, once soaked in fear, now felt like something alive again. Cole paused at the porch steps, looking out across the valley. For the first time in years, there was no weight pressing on his chest. Just a steady breath. Ranger nudged his hand once, firmly. "Yeah," Cole whispered. "I feel it, too." They stepped inside the home they'd rebuilt together, the quiet settling around them like a well-earned promise. The foundation began with nothing more than a folded notebook and a long, quiet walk through the woods. Cole carried Crowley's final journal under his arm, Ranger steady at his side, their boots and paws crushing patches of frost, still lingering along the trail. It started as a promise whispered to a stone monument. It became something much larger. Within 3 months, the Crowley and Ranger Foundation opened its doors. The town donated an old ranger station near the creek, stripped it down, and rebuilt it with their own hands. Veterans from 3 counties volunteered. Journalists from Denver and Billings sent messages asking if they could help. What Cole envisioned as a modest office soon turned into a growing center dedicated to investigative reporting, environmental justice, and support for returning veterans. Mira Dawson called it a sanctuary for truth seekers. Others called it overdue, but the locals gave it another name: the house the dog built. Ranger spent his mornings lying near the entrance on a sun-warmed patch of wood, watching people come and go. Veterans with tired eyes knelt to greet him. Reporters scratched behind his ears before heading into workshops on evidence gathering and source protection. Some days he wandered room to room, nose brushing against boots or hands, as if reminding people why they were there. Cole noticed something every time Ranger did that. Shoulders straightened, voices steadied, people breathed easier. Healing came in strange forms. Sometimes it wore a vest and wagged its tail. On a crisp autumn morning, Mira arrived carrying a thick envelope. Ranger spotted her first and trotted across the porch with the confidence of someone who believed every visitor might be bringing something important. Mira knelt, letting him press his forehead into her shoulder before handing Cole the envelope. "I think you should open it," she said. Inside was a letter stamped with the insignia of the National Press Alliance. Cole didn't recognize the seal at first, but Mira's grin gave away the meaning long before she spoke. "The investigation piece won the Hayden Award," she said softly. "They're calling it the most impactful environmental exposé of the decade." Cole let the words settle in the cool air. He looked at Mira, then at Ranger, who had already settled at his feet, tail sweeping the ground with slow pride. "You earned this," Cole said. Mira shook her head. "I didn't chase that company alone, and I didn't find Crowley alone. You two did that. Without this dog, those files would still be buried under ash and stone." The moment lingered, warm and quiet. Later that afternoon, a group of local kids stopped by on a school field trip. Cole wasn't one for public speaking, but the teacher insisted he share a few words about the land, the creek, and the truth buried beneath the cabin. Ranger sat beside him the entire time, calm and alert, eyes scanning the forest like he was still on patrol. One of the kids raised a hand. "Is he the dog that found the secret under the floor?" Cole nodded. "He is." Another kid asked, "How did he know?" Cole glanced down at Ranger. The dog turned his head toward the children as if waiting to hear the answer too. Sometimes a dog can see the things we're too scared to look at. Cole said quietly. He didn't find treasure or ghosts, he found the truth. And the truth saves people, even when we don't realize we need saving. The kids approached Ranger one by one, small hands brushing through his fur. Ranger barely moved, only exhaled slowly, a breath filled with patience and something older than instinct. A veteran from the foundation leaned against the railing, wiping at his eyes. Cole pretended not to notice. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, Cole sat on the porch steps and watched a slow fog roll across the valley. Ranger settled beside him, leaning against his leg. It was their old habit, born from long nights overseas when silence weighed heavier than gunfire. You realize you changed more than my life, Cole said. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of his voice. You changed this whole town. You changed the story Crowley never got to finish. You made people listen. You made them believe. The dog's amber eyes held his, steady and knowing. Cole had seen loyalty in war, in fire, in the freeze of winter storms. But the loyalty beside him now felt different. It wasn't survival. It wasn't duty. It was legacy. Down in town, lights flickered on as evening settled. The creek murmured its new, clean song through the valley. Somewhere inside the foundation building, Mira was preparing a presentation for local journalists, her voice carrying through the open window in soft, determined notes. And on the porch, Cole understood something he'd overlooked for months. This place wasn't haunted anymore. Ranger had made sure of that. Cole rested his hand on the dog's back. Ranger pressed into it, eyes drifting towards the ridge, the place where the first scratch of truth had echoed through the cabin floor. You didn't just save me, Cole whispered. You saved everything that mattered. Ranger exhaled, slow and satisfied, and the valley carried that breath like a quiet vow. Late afternoon settled over Cold Creek, with the quiet certainty of a place that had survived its storms. The new cabin stood warm against the golden light, its windows glowing like soft embers. On the porch, Cole Harrison leaned back in his chair, one foot hooked around the railing, a mug cooling in his hand. Ranger lay stretched out beside him, head resting on his paws, his fur touched with silver that hadn't been there a year ago. A car crunched along the gravel path. Cole watched as a young reporter stepped out, notebook tucked under one arm, camera bag slung over her shoulder. She hesitated before climbing the porch steps, taking in the carved wooden sign hanging above the door. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. Ranger's ears twitched at the visitor. He lifted his head, calm and aware, the quiet sentinel he had always been. Thanks for agreeing to meet, the reporter said softly. People in town talk about him like he's a legend. Cole didn't smile, but something warm flickered at the edge of his expression. He is. The reporter took a seat on the porch bench, flipping open her notebook. She hesitated again, glancing at Ranger with the reverence people usually reserved for monuments. Can I ask you something? She said. The first night you moved in. Do you think Ranger knew what he was digging up? Cole looked down at the dog beside him. Ranger blinked slowly, tail brushing once against the wood. Cole took a breath before answering. He always knows, Cole said. His voice was low, even. He wasn't digging for trouble, he was digging for the truth. The wind moved gently through the trees, a soft rustle like the mountain agreeing. The reporter scribbled that down, then lowered her pen. And you, Mr. Harrison? What did you think when you realized what was under your feet? Cole's gaze drifted out across the valley. He remembered the cold that night, the cracking stone, the first glimpse of Crowley's notebook. He remembered fear. But he also remembered Ranger standing between him and the unknown, a steady presence forged in war and carried into peace. I thought, he said slowly, that some things refuse to stay buried, and sometimes it takes a dog to remind us that the truth matters more than our comfort. The reporter swallowed, her eyes shining a little. She glanced at Ranger again. Does he ever rest? Cole chuckled under his breath. He rests, but he never stops watching. As if on cue, Ranger lifted his head higher, ears tilting toward the tree line. Somewhere far off, a deer stepped over fallen branches. Ranger didn't bark. He didn't need to. His job wasn't fear, it was understanding. The reporter closed her notebook and rose. I think people need to hear this story, not for the scandal, for him, and for the man who listened to him. Cole stood as well. Ranger pushed himself up, moving a little slower these days, but no less sure. The reporter offered her hand awkwardly to the dog. Ranger sniffed it, then pressed his nose into her palm with quiet acceptance. "He trusts you," Cole said. "That's not something he gives lightly." She looked overwhelmed, nodding a few times before stepping back. "Thank you, honestly." Cole watched her walk to her car, watched the dust trail fade into the lengthening shadows. When she was gone, he sat back down. Ranger settled beside him, leaning into his leg. Cole draped an arm over the shepherd's shoulders. "You gave this mountain its voice back, buddy." Ranger let out a soft, rumbling sigh, the kind he used to make in overseas barracks when everything outside was exploding, but he refused to leave Cole's side. The sun sank lower, spilling copper light across the rebuilt cabin. The air smelled of sap and warming earth, the first hints of summer drifting through the valley. Cole felt the weight that had once crushed him loosen a little more. "You didn't just save my life," Cole murmured. "You saved the truth. And you saved this town." Ranger closed his eyes, but his ears stayed alert. A moment later, Cole reached for the small wood-burned camera mounted near the porch rail. It wasn't for security. It was something Mira had insisted on, something to capture the final interview for the Foundation's documentary. Cole stared into the lens. "If you're watching this," he said, voice steady, "then you know what this dog did. Not just for me. For all of us." He rested a hand on Ranger's coat. "Most heroes don't wear badges. Most don't make speeches. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs and do the hard thing even when we're too scared to. So here's my question." He paused, letting the silence breathe. "What is your story with a loyal pet?" Ranger opened one eye, looked at the camera, then back at Cole. "And if you've ever loved a German shepherd?" Cole added softly, "Or had one save you in ways no one else could?" "Share their story." He nodded once toward the camera. "And support the German Shepherd channel. Stories like his deserve a place to live forever." Ranger shifted closer, pressing against Cole's side as the screen faded into the last quiet glow of the Cold Creek sunset.